What stuns me when I look at the situation with the silence of the Beatles and the silence of doom that they envelope our world with. It's appalled astonishment that they could get away with it. How did they get away with this? In light of what has happened in Gaza, perhaps it's not a singular question. Maybe it's even something of a selfish question. Although Gaza, too, was silent during the profound 80s atrocity, I worked in a medical library in 1984, and I saw what anthropology of the University of Pittsburgh did with Yoko Ono. They first got rid of my father by murdering him theatrically. They put a bat in his bed and poisoned him. And then they tipped me off as to the fact that what they were up to was a thought, a threaded needle. A Venus flytrap emerged on Mount Desert Island, along with the letters of Gail Burson, the Texas school book, and the story of how I was kidnapped, tortured, and gassed by the Pittman gang, which is like quarrymen. And the Beatles helped the people who they claimed killed John Lennon, saying it was all about the money. And they silenced any attempts to warn, attempts to apprehend the guilty. They led into violations of civil liberties beyond imagination, crime after terrible, terrible crime, crimes that continue to the present day, all saying they were defending Ronald Reagan. How did they get away with that? The slippery claim that they make as a license to do all that is that they were picking up the debris from what they claim was John Lennon's murder. Well, there are mysteries about John Lennon's murder. Is there a body? Absolutely not. What was Sean Strubb doing outside the Dakota? Why was he profiled by me before he was identified outside the Dakota? How did I know that a prominent Holocaust survivor, Ken, had given himself HIV and joined the Green Party? Because of a Foucault meeting with the Ayatollah Khomeini back in the days of the 444 symbolic hostage taking. And of course, my name is Jimmy C, like Jimmy Carter's Jimmy C. And the men who attacked me were named Ronnie and Casper, just like Reagan and Weinberger. Well, you can see that there must be money in a story like that. Publishers, were they given license and allowed to tell their version, could clean up for the Beatles. And it was all about Nosferatu's favorite, Israel Katz, Leslie Sinetta Katz from Australia, a red-headed Jewish girl who was valedictorian of Ellis, where the museum thieves came from. She formed Jabberwocky with John Schulman. John Schulman's employer used to come to Adam Eisenstadt's house, who works for Donald Trump. He was arrested on a $6 million museum heist. It was more than $6 million, but they say $6 million because it's a code number for allowing him house arrest. How'd they get away with this? How did Paul McCartney get away with a pun like "beat less" and claim that the fact that she dated me for 2 years and was let go of, still a virgin, proves me a rapist. Well, Yoko Ono has a maniacal film where they chase around the girl with cameras until she's a weeping pulp of harassed confusion called rape. So when you look at someone like Yoko Ono, you're raping her. So when you talk to Robert Fripp, you're raping him. So when you get a letter from Peter Gabriel, you're raping them. And this all makes sense to the psychotic mind of Roger Waters. Why did they kill my father? Well, they put out a song called That Voice Again. They also put out a song called San Jacinto. My father was on the U.S. San Jacinto. He was a radio room lieutenant. His voice could be heard by everybody. On the high seas, a veteran of Leyte Gulf. And here we are in Tacoma, where they've set up an end game, where the Black Panthers are advocating for Yoko Ono, where Sharon Tamika Santos is advocating for Yoko Ono, doing all they can to isolate and humiliate me. They've given me Parkinson's, which is no walk in the park, believe me. And over there they have the magic mountain that comes and goes. Some days you can see it, some days you can't. And the Tacoma Dome. It all adds up to a poem about the old story of Truman considering bombing Mount Edo, whatever the magic mountain is in Japan. They have a flashcard. And they ignore the locators here. They have something called Cosmonaut and Supernova right on top of each other at a hair barber. It's clear what that indicates in light of everything else. There was a port of Lebanon explosion, which is an index. They admitted they used index in school. Shifty said we used indexology. They admitted what they're doing. The supernova was the port explosion in Lebanon was an index to the supernova explosion. How did they get away with this? Mike Johnson says abortion is genocide. Look what he's doing in Gaza. It's toddler-side. They relish murdering people. It's not that Donald Trump thinks that abortion is murder. He thinks that murder is abortion. He should have the power to just abort anybody he wants to. Why should they care? And they've adopted that as their government. They've adopted a revenge attack for Hiroshima. That's Seattle government. I mean, it's going to, if they do it, it's going to poison the police station. It's going to poison the Stranger newspaper in Dan Savage's office. And they hijack an airplane, smack it down on an island in Cologne. They're into it. It's a Hannibal doctrine for them. They're on serious drugs, for one thing. Very serious drugs. And you have these sandbaggers. They've legalized unbelievable psychedelics in these areas. It's really sad. Really sad. They've abandoned all pretense of sustainable development goals, of educational philosophy. For the last 2 years, you haven't been allowed to talk to your neighbors about politics ever at all. Forbidden. And they have this gang of people, Abby Martin, Max Blumenfeld, Matt Kennard, of dubious credentials, all lined up in an alt-media aeroflot on YouTube channels and Twitter and Rumble, defending Gaza. I mean, there's nothing wrong with defending Gaza. Gaza has been a tearjerker. I grew up in a Jewish Holocaust survivor community, so I see the wheel how Jews normalize this to get revenge. Believe me, this is an attack on the United States of America by the Jews, what they're doing in Gaza. They want the world to hate us, and they're making sure that the world does. And these sandbaggers, came to the defense of Gail Burston. They refused to say a word about Gail Burston. They refused to say a word. How did the Beatles get away with this? There's only one explanation, and you're not going to get it by George Galloway. George Galloway wants the whole thing to resolve to a party with Bob Dylan. He wants the happy ending to be Yoko Ono and Bob Dylan doing a waltz with Clint Eastwood playing, the banjo. How did they get away with it? There's only one explanation. And what's more, the explanation is verifiable for fact of what they did. John Lennon pulled a Houdini. It was a stunt out of Ian Fleming's You Only Live Twice. The whole operation worked with Clint Eastwood and Ronald Reagan. And the proof of that is perfectly clear. The attorneys for Reagan explanation for the Venus flytrap on Mount Desert Island from the Federal Emergency Management Agency at the University of Pittsburgh Law had me in D.C. the day he claims he was shot. He came out and waved to me. And he said, they made me a brochure from Pentagon Disney that said there's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes. And Ono set up shop in Pitt News and told me know when to tell David Lucarelli to pretend they'd found the script. They already knew what the script said. They never took it from my house. They never Xeroxed it. They never did a mastered it. And then they set up this thing called Intercept with Noam Chomsky. He brought down JFK Jr.'s plane, Woodsole, his gang, Probanik, who was following me at the Venus flytrap on Mount Desert Island. Woodsole is where the letters of Gail Burston originated, too, when she wasn't in Israel. What intercept? There was no intercept. An legitimate intercept would have been public warning, calling the state troopers and saying, we need the federal marshals to question Reagan about this publicly. We need a congressional review to see what he has to say about this because it's encrypted in all of his movies, all the way back to the days when D'Annunzio and D.W. Griffith were planning a meeting with Mussolini in Fayoum in Italy and Hollywood.